And I need to keep an eye here to make sure that there is no late comers waiting. Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti Om. Welcome to our Viveka. We are coming to the end of it. And I got an email from Lynn asking me which text will start. By the way, Lynn, I forgot because I had to rush here. I read that chapter, that verse 496 or something like that. And then I could understand the entire context. I was planning to have it available to all of us so we could look into that. But since I had to rush here, I left my other laptop home. So we leave it for next Thursday. It's a very nice verse. And when I read that verse, it came into my mind, shall we move into Mandukya or shall we play with some extra verse of Vivekachudamani? Because some of those verses are very rich, you know. So that's what crossed my mind. I have to make up my mind because we are definitely coming to the end of it now. Okay. The scripture speaks of karma from the empirical standpoint to satisfy the curiosity of dull-witted people who want to know why the body remains in the wake of self-knowledge. So I would go further and say that the scripture speaks about karma and the karma of the yoni, to explain, to satisfy the questions, the curiosity of people who did not really understand yet that there are different orders of reality and the body remains after self-knowledge. And not only the body remains, but the mind remains as well. Understand? So a lot of people get confused because it sees, wow, the body remains, the results of previous actions remain, and the mind remains. So, and then what is that? We thought that with the wake of self-knowledge, so the mind should go and one should be in an eternal state of bliss. And the body and the problems and troubles and karmas, prarabdha karmas, all of that should somehow disappear. And here, Shankara says that all of our scripture speaks of karma from the empirical standpoint, not from paramarthika, but from pratibhasika. No? Pratibhasika, no, vyavaharika. Today I get it right, only vyavaharika and pratibhasika. So from the vyavaharika standpoint, karma, the body remains, the mind remains, everything in mithya remains. And by the way, that verse 498 was the following one was unfolding very nicely this aspect of the mind as well. The mind of the yoni, it remains, subject to the field because in mithya everything is subject to change. You understand? The yoni is the one that he knows he's not the mind, and this knowledge is firm, clear. But as everything in mithya, everything is subject to change. It's being a fact. The only difference is that the mind of the yoni has a certain strength, a certain resistance, a certain balance. it changed less, but yet it changed, you understand? And this is what Shankara wants to say here. People who do not understand these different levels or dimensions or orders, they get confused. So Vedanta can be confused because of that, because we have two orders of the same reality, which is Satya. One is the absolute reality, Satya, and the other is Mithya, which is an apparent order of reality with several sub-orders of apparent reality within itself. And the people who do not understand that is for the people who do not understand the nuance of these sub-orders of reality is the scripture speaks of karma. The doubt may arise if there is no karma for the liberated, because in the previous verse we have the term that in truth there is no real karma for the yearning. There is, but there isn't. So there is, as we can say, for the body. The mind is going to be impacted a little bit as well with adversities, okay? But the yan is the one who has broken, has dissociated from the identification I, the body, mind. You understand? And then everything that's going to impact the body and the mind, the karma for the yoni, is going to be delivered for the body mind. And the yoni being identified as consciousness, it does not really take it. It does not, claim it. It's my karma. So that's the only difference. But the karma is going to come. It's going to come to the body. And as I said in the previous lessons, so it even impacts the mind. But the ayana is no longer identified with the mind as the mind. The doubt may arise if there is no karma for the liberated. Why does the scripture describe it as thought it were real? Recall that in verse 95 and 96, we are offered an explanation of what's called Parabhada karma. So in those verses, we were saying that the Parabhada karma is going to manifest the same way, I forgot the name. What you say? And the arrow is going to reach its destination once it is released, right? So that's the nature of Parabhada karma. It is going to manifest. But as it has been said, it's not going to be taken as my karma from the standpoint of the yoni. So when we are liberated by self-knowledge, we are told that karma, which has already been set in motion, must complete its motion. Yes, it is going to complete. You remember that we went to look into the two aspects of the ego, the doer, the karta, and the receiver of the results of those doings, the karta and the bhokta. Yeah? So those are the two aspects of the ego. Yeah? So when the ego is very, very well established in this fundamental ignorance, the sense of doership, and then it's going to feel attached to the action as the doer, and it's going to be attached to the results of the actions as the receiver, as the bhokta. Yeah? So when the action is in motion, it's going to complete its course. There is no doubt about that. But no sooner does the text, and then right after that, the text also make this statement that it apparently contradicts it claiming that there is no karma for the yoni. So it's the same concept. Let me see if there is anybody waiting here. No. So it's the same concept as before. So it appears to be a contradiction, but in fact, there is no contradiction because as we have understood, the yoni in its secondary nature, identity, as the body-mind, it's going to receive the results of its previous actions before self-knowledge, before this birth. But the yoni being established in its primary, the primary higher nature as consciousness, is going to say, okay, it's coming for the body-mind, but it does not come to me. And that is the only benefit there is to self-knowledge. And the fact is that this self-knowledge helps the secondary nature of the yoni to take that prarabdha karma with a different attitude, as I often say, with elegance, with gratitude, with the karma yoga spirit. Okay? So there is no contradiction. It's just because we are referring to two orders, two natures of the same self, the primary, the higher, the fundamental nature of the I as consciousness, and the secondary, the inferior or the apparent nature of the body-mind as the jiva. So those two orders of reality. How can this contradiction be reconciled? So we already have it reconciled. In the present verse, we are told that the previous explanation was offered for the sake of the dull-witted. So this is a very, it's not a very nice expression, right? You guys? It's not. So we should just soften it up a little bit and say for the sake of those yet a little bit confused, So for the sake of the ones yet confused between these two orders, this verse was offered. This is not an elitist expression of concept, but rather an acknowledgement that reality can be viewed from the empirical level at which independent objects seem to exist. So it can be seen from both angles, from the angle, actually it can be seen from three angles. We can see this apparent reality from the standpoint of consciousness, and then of course consciousness does not see anything, but we, jiva, claiming our identity as consciousness, we can see everything, all phenomena of Mithya from that angle, from that standpoint. And the same Jiva Atma, understanding Ishvara, can see the manifestation from that perspective as well. From the angle of that understanding, you will also see this order of reality, as all is just Ishvara, and can be seen from the standpoint of the ego. And that is the most difficult position to be, this identification with the body-mind as my own self, especially when we forget that there is a higher power, higher factor called Ishvara, So that is the most precarious and suffering state, mental state of the humanity. So we can view from different levels, and we can also see from the empirical level, and then from the empirical level, there is karma and so on. The teaching takes our hand at this level of the Vyavaharika, the projection of Maheshwara. That's one of the beauties of Vedanta, that it just goes into Mithya, goes into the Vyavaharika, and then it can help us to understand Mithya before we are qualified to understand our nature as Satya, which is much different from just denying existence of Mithya, the existence of the jiva, and just affirming that you are Satya, you are consciousness, and so on. Vedanta uses a teaching method called Adhyaropa Apavada, an answer to a doubt or objection is given provisionally in a manner suited to the inquirer's present capacity to understand. When that understanding progresses to a subtler level, the previous answer can be negated. So I guess we all have that experience, that we see certain answers, some provisional kind of answers that sometimes it's referred to as concessions to ignorance. So we concede some bits and pieces of ignorance so that we can gradually develop and refine our minds, our intellect, until we can grasp and understand and assimilate higher, more truthful, absolute truthful answers. So that is the teaching of Vedanta, presenting the questions and answering the questions. And of course, when there is a Q&A, the teacher must answer the student to the very level his question or her question is coming from. You cannot say, no, this is the wrong question. I'm going to talk about some higher things. Of course, a Vedanta teacher cannot answer anyone who comes from the angle of a psychological question, because Vedanta does not address those psychologies of the jivas in its programs and so on. But as a Vedanta teacher, every Vedanta teacher must answer one's student exactly on the same level that the student is coming from. And that's gradually going to lead us to more and more deeper waters of the Vedantic teachings. An answer to a doubt or objection is given provisionally in a manner suit to the inquirer's present capacity to understand. When that understanding progresses to a subtler level, the previous answer can be negated. And once, if we really have digested the previous questions and answers, the previous teachings, like Ramji is very, very smart and intelligent and brilliant in the way he structures his books, because he structures it so that first you need to understand these concepts. And sometimes he states in his books, if you do not understand this concept, don't move to the next chapter. You understand? So you need to assimilate, understand, put it to sleep as the questions and the doubts to sleep, resolve the doubts and the apparent contradiction before you move on. So that is the method of Vedanta. When that understanding progresses to a subtler level, the previous answer can be negated. And then you say, okay, there is no karma for the yoni. Now I understand why there is karma for the yoni and why there is no karma for the yoni. There is karma for the yoni from the standpoint of the self-ignorant. From the standpoint of another yoni, he sees and says, okay, this and this is happening, but there is no karma for the yoni, because I know the yoni is not going to claim its inferior nature. The yoni is the one who has claimed his superior nature, right? So as we progress, we can put to rest those previous answers, which are kind of concessions to ignorance. In the same manner, we tell children stories designed to satisfy their curiosity. The intention is not to deceive or lie to the kids, but merely to hold the full and factual explanation we reserve until the time when the child has matured sufficient to receive it. Very nicely put. And so, likewise, we should always begin about talking, introducing Vedanta on the level of karma, dharma, explaining that upasana is an option to develop certain mental qualities. And then from there, we move into Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. From the highest standpoint of truth, karma is seen as a provisional explanation that satisfies the curiosity that arises at the empirical level. So in this physical material manifestation, so things are observed as reality, but they are not. But the concept of karma serves the purpose, to explain this phenomenon until further development in the mind of the inquirer. But once we know that only the self exists, only consciousness exists, and all these objects, all these experiences, all these karmas and results of karmas, they are just objects appearing with the consciousness. So once that ultimate understanding is properly established, there is no karma. For there is no body, no actor, no time. So once that understanding is clear, you say, okay, all there is consciousness, and in truth, there is no karma. Okay? All of these seemingly disparate things, contradictory things that are integral to the concept of karma only appear to exist when looked from that empirical level. No? From that angle, they exist and they must be taken into account. We need to understand karma, we need to understand dharma, and the entire complexity of this interaction between Jiva, Ishvara, and Jagata, okay? Until we understand the substratum of Jiva, Ishvara, and Jagata as the only reality, meaning to say consciousness, Satya. Karma is like the snake in the rope. So we have the snake. The snake is another explanation of this apparent order of reality. In truth, the snake is what we call the pratibhasika, because it's a superimposition caused by Jiva's mind. You understand? So there is this other snake, which is another aspect of this empirical order of reality. And then it says that karma is like the snake in the rope. It has no existence independent of its substratum. In other words, anything that happens, any object of experience, has no substance independently from the conscious awareness in which these objects occur, right? That's what it means. The substratum. Each substratum is awareness, the self, consciousness. But so long as we believe that the rope to be a snake, that is, as long as we superimpose the body-mind upon consciousness, we are superimpose again the body-mind upon consciousness. As long as this superimposition persists, the teaching must address this confusion at the very level where it occurs. Of course, as long as we are still entangled with this superimposition, we must never move on and just talk about I am awareness, I am awareness, I am awareness. Because the mantra Aham Brahmasmi, Aham Brahmasmi, Aham Brahmasmi has not yet, resolved this fundamental, persistent, hardwired ignorance, which is the superimposition of the body-mind on consciousness. As long as it persists, the teaching must address this confusion and must address it at the level where it occurs. Karma is a transitional concept, of course. I remember there is a guy that showed up in the internet a few years back, maybe 4 or 5, and he came from India. So he's an American. He lived many years in India, and he presents himself with a long white beard. He must be on his mid-70s. And he comes from his ashram, his associations with some gurus in India. You remember his name, Ronaldo? I think you found him recently. Yeah? You remember? Can you remind me of his name that I forgot?
Quem que é o que você quer saber? Quem que é o cara?
Yeah, I think, yeah. Doesn't matter. Let's not mention the name. It's better. It can just remember. But anyhow, this guy comes and he delivers his talks, and his talks are very simple, and it's all the time the same, and it's basically saying that there is no karma, there is no jiva, there is no ishwara, there is no student, there is no teacher, and all there is consciousness. And he presents that like pulling the final teachings of Mandukya and other Upanishads that establish the final truth. You understand? Era, yeah, era. Maybe some of you, my era. So he became very popular, if I recall, for in the internet because he was coming and he was saying, all these people that talk about karma, dharma, and pasana, and teachers, and all these gurus, this is not Vedanta. He was saying, this is not Vedanta. You are being deceived. And the people were really getting back to me and to Stan and other people and say, what is this guy saying? He's saying that he's presenting people with the real Vedanta. So the real Vedanta is this, is the compassion, of going into meeting this apparent order of reality to hold us by our hands, and help us to understand the apparent reality before we can move on to understand the absolute reality. Okay, I have somebody who decided to chat with me. That's not a good time. So, karma is a transitional concept. It no longer concerns the yoni, although they too may seem to be subject to karma in the observation of one who still thinks that the body and the mind exists independently, So it's very important to understand if you believe that the body and mind has independent existence and then you believe that they are real, but as we know, they are just a superimposition on what we are as consciousness, the witnessing conscious principle, the subject. So karma is just a concession to this. It's transitional. It is for the sake of those laboring under this confusion that the topic of karma for the liberated is addressed. And this is a very, very, very subtle, important concept, and a lot of the time confused, mystified, and even a lot of the time exaggerated by some of these big gurus, because they make it seem that the mind can be absolutely liberated, the intellect can be absolutely liberated in the sense that the jiva can be the great liberated one. Now, only consciousness is liberated. And as Ramana Maharaj said once, he says, tell me one time that you were not liberated, because, he was addressing the individual as consciousness. I say, what is this talk about liberation? Tell me a moment that consciousness is not being free and liberated. You understand? So this confusion is very, very persistent and common and important, because people who are still confused, Satya with Mithya, they still get confused. You understand? And they want something that is impossible. They want the body mind to be mortal, the body mind to be absolutely omnipresent, omnipotent, and totally totally enlightened, and living in certain states and never be affected by anything in Mithya. And then what is the end result? These gurus, they begin living a life in which they develop a kind of schizophrenia. They show a face to the crowds, to the students, but behind the screens, within their inner circle, they behave as a human being. You understand? And then only the inner circle can see the Guru's humanity, because he's putting up a pose to the crowd as if nothing ever touched his mind, nada ever affect his body mind, which is a lie. The Jnani is the one who has a certain strength, a certain resistance, a certain balance and equilibrium. But like any and everything in Nietzsche, mind is also subject to fluctuation. The verse 101. Vedanta boils down to one fact for which the texts are the means of knowledge. The texts are the means of knowledge. The individual and the world are one. Liberation is staying firm in this knowledge, to stay with this knowledge. What it means to stay with this knowledge? Some people think that liberation is to keep repeating this, that I am the totality, there is only consciousness, I am consciousness, the individual is a dream, the world is a dream, everything is just me, consciousness. So liberation is staying with this knowledge, but it does not mean to become a parrot, a papagayo, repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. No, it just means that the knowledge was properly assimilated, and the Jnani can just live its life without having to repeat it mentrically. You understand? Vedanta serves only the purpose of revealing this knowledge. It's a means of knowledge. The individual and the world are one, Tatvamasi, I, the jiva, the individual, am the totality as presented in the Vivekachudamani. The jiva is the totality, is Brahman. So, and liberation is staying with this knowledge, So which way we're going to stay with this knowledge? So by understanding it fully until it becomes a fact. And then one no longer needs to remember it. It's a self-knowledge is something that is really valuable when it's no longer subject to forgetfulness. And therefore, it does not need to be remembered again and again and again, because you want to remember things when you forget. Oh, it means to say that every time that I have other thoughts in my mind, I'm forgetting that I am the free, liberate consciousness. No, other thoughts can be there. But once this knowledge is firmly integrated, absorbed, digest, assimilated, and then the mind can be occupied by many other thoughts, by many other feeling sensations. And this knowledge is not subject to forgetfulness, although there are many other thoughts appearing. You understand? But this thought, this Aham Brahmasmi is the background from which all other thoughts arise. Excuse me. So the texts of Vedanta are many. Their meaning is one. As the months and years go by, the decades, the more we go into Vedanta, the more we study several texts and Upanishads and Gita and so on, we get to this understanding that there are many verses, many texts, many books, many Upanishads, but the teaching is all one and the same. It's Dharma, Karma, Upasana, and Jnana Yoga. Aham Brahmasmi, Tatvamasi. Of course, that to go into the understanding of Mithya is what takes the longest, because Mithya is complex. It's very, very tricky. It's beginningless. It's hardwired and takes some time to understand. the system, the mechanics, you know, this will of desire, words, deeds, results of deeds, and more vasanas being reinforced or offset, you know, depending on the quality of our thoughts and actions. So to get to understand media is what takes a long time. But once the mind is properly prepared, and then liberation is easy. And once liberation and then once self-knowledge becomes easy. And then once self-knowledge is properly assimilated, and then staying with this knowledge is the most natural process. You understand? You most probably remember me saying my concern in 2011 or 2012 when this understanding became clear to me, and I was still running my restaurant, and I was afraid because I was going to have so many thoughts rushing through my mind as I opened the restaurant on Friday evening or Saturday, and I was afraid that that knowledge could be canceled, you know, by all these other thoughts. And then it took me a few weeks until I relaxed with that, because I understood that once this vision takes place, it does not really, it cannot be forgotten, you know. I mean, once you see it, that I like, Vedanta is very often present as the vision. It's a vision, we can say the vision of the nature of reality is non-duality, or the vision that everything is just consciousness, or the vision that I am this consciousness. You understand? So this vision, once it takes place, and then it is not cancelled or challenged by other thoughts. The thoughts come, and then they come within the scope of this primary thought, which is no longer I, the ego, but it is I, consciousness. So this is the yearning, staying naturally with this knowledge without any fear of losing, because this knowledge is the most unique sort of knowledge. It's self-knowledge. It's the knowledge of the nature of the knower. And once this understanding is clear and firm and solid, and then there is nothing that can challenge this knowledge, because you are staying with this knowledge because you know you are staying with the self. You cannot exist without this conscious self. So liberation is staying with consciousness, and you are consciousness, and this knowledge is not forgotten because you are never not present, to recall the website of TED, if I recall properly, okay? Never not present. The texts of Vedanta are many, their meaning is one. You are that consciousness. The 108 extant Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Brahma Sutras, and countless commentaries, as well the voluminous writings of Shankaracharya, including these texts, are a means of knowledge to lead us to the realization of the simple truth. The individual is consciousness. The individual is the substratum of the totality, okay? The individual and Brahman are one. So, and that one we call consciousness itself. As long as we remain established in this knowledge, we are free. And that brings us to an interesting kind of quest. It's like, but how about these people who seem to have this knowledge and then they seem to lose it, you know? Because we probably heard about that, and people who thought like, oh, now I'm enlightened and I know I'm consciousness, I know that the nature of reality is non-duality, but then, something happens and one seemingly forgets that, So we'll never know. I heard so many times this happening, and I lived with Papaji for 3 years, listening to his talks every day. And I saw many people standing before him and complaining, "Oh, Papaji, I lost it, and you told me that I have got it, and now I lost it." You know. So I saw that in something, the power of these vasanas are enormous. You know. Later on with Vedanta, I could understand this machinery and understand that the vasanas could somehow here and there challenge that vision, I am consciousness, I am free, and bring back those limiting notions. I am the body mind, and again I feel limited. You understand? So anything is possible. That's why I was so concerned when this vision developed in my mind, this clarity developed in my mind, and I did not talk to anybody. I did not talk to my wife at the time. I let kind of a month go by because I was afraid that it would be another light that goes on and then goes off again. You understand? Anything is possible in Mitya, no? But we say that once this self-knowledge is hard, fast, and solid, it's clear and solid, and then it's not subject to forgetfulness, and which is different from having these glimpses of Aham Brahmasmi. A lot of people have glimpses of Aham Brahmasmi without having done enough groundwork to retain that knowledge and to digest that knowledge. You understand? With maturity, a lot of people have the glimpse of this self-knowledge, and they may lose it due to lack of preparedness, lack of maturity. And that one is the self. As long as we remain established in this knowledge, we are free. When we depart from it, so we don't depart from this knowledge. Nobody wants to depart from this knowledge. But old tendencies are going to come like a tsunami sometimes, you know, and they just wash away this clear self-knowledge, this clear vision, this certainty of self-knowledge can be washed away by the power of hardwired vasanas. Nobody wants to depart from it, of course. When we depart from it, we seem again limited, we seem bound. Jean-Paul Sartre, the late existential philosopher, once famously said, "Hell is the other. There is truth in this statement, no matter what Sartre intended by it." So hell is the other. So we know that the other is not the hell, although it indeed, it seems sometimes, you know. But what is the hell in truth? The hell is the impression or the experience that reality is duality and the other is real, and it is separate, independent, and apart from you. And then the other can be a real hell. There is truth in this statement, no matter what Sartre intended by it. The Vedanta says much the same thing. When we see ourselves as separate from the world, including the other person, you know, when we see the other as separate, as we see the other as real, and then we are plunged into duality, and duality brings about psychological suffering. Fear begins when we see something outside of us, and fear vanishes when we realize nothing exists outside of consciousness. That's very nice. Huh? So we see duality, and then we get hooked up. We're seeing that the sense, perception of other things, other people, and then there is potential for trouble. Again, I remember Papaji saying, so he used to say like, wherever there are two, there is disagreement, he used to say. Couples would go there, oh, there is problems here and this and that. And Papaji, you told us to get married because you find that the marriage life is the most sacred life. And it's the only relationship that, it was chosen by us and should be chosen very carefully and should be kept and so on as a beautiful and sacred relationship. But now there is so much trouble and conflict. And then you say, oh, wherever there are two, there is conflict. You have to see the other as your own self. But as we know, this is much easier said than done, lived and experienced. Huh? As I many times said, there is nothing more challenging for the yoni than to be a householder, huh? with the burden of family life and sometimes with children and jobs. And no wonder Papaji walked away from his wife. And no wonder Papaji walked away to the caves, because it's tough to live in the world, not being affected by the world is the greatest challenge of self-knowledge, Fear vanishes when we realize that nothing exists outside of us. Nothing can threaten us, for there is nothing that is not us. The individual is part of the world, and the world appears in awareness. As long as we see ourselves as an object and other object, will feel incomplete. I would say this sentence a little different. So long as we see ourselves as the subject, jiva. What is this word, emit? Emit? What is the meaning of this, emit?
It's
amongst.
Huh?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Amongst, I would say. Among.
Among, okay.
Together with.
Yeah. So I would change this sentence and say, because the Anyani, the Jiva, the Samsari, the one who most of the time see oneself as the subject Jiva, among a lot of objects, because every human Jiva, assumes that I am the subject here. The self-ignorant does not really have an objective view of their own body-mind, So the Anyani sees himself as the subject, and he sees himself surrounded by so many objects. And that fundamental duality, the subject-object duality, the jiva, and the objects that appear to serve the purpose to complete myself, is going to make this jiva to feel very, very vulnerable and inadequate and incomplete, and he's going to be struggling with the other and with all other objects, trying to attract what he likes and appreciates and avoid what he does not appreciate. So the individual, as long as we see ourselves as an object, jiva, surrounded by so many objects, we feel insecure, we feel vulnerable, we feel like challenged by all these other objects, because most of the time these objects are not really totally according to my likes and dislikes. We're going to feel limited by this fundamental duality, myself, the subject, and all these objects, these nasty objects that a lot of the times are not really what I want, what I wish, right? This is in a natural feeling or state, one we can never rest with, for it alienates us in every way. So as we know, this is the definition of samsara, this fundamental duality between the jiva, which is indeed an object, sentient object, but takes itself to be the subject, the body and the mind, and finds himself surrounded by all kinds of objects, and he takes the objects to be there for the sake of completing itself or herself or himself, and then he is very much limited by everything he wished to have but does not have. He feels very much limited by what he has, but he is afraid he may lose. And he feels also very much limited by what he has, but he would like to not have. The desire to push things away, the desire I'm not having what I'm having. This brings a sense of incompletion and limitation to the mind of the jiva. Understand? So all these objects are going to create this fundamental duality, the jiva subject and all the objects around is going to produce this unnatural feeling. It's a natural feeling because it's a constant feeling of uneasiness, of discomfort, of mental agitation, perturbation, and anxiety, expectation, projection, and so on. So this is a very unnatural feeling, and this is properly defined on the chapter 2 of the Gita as samsara, because in samsara one can never rest. For this condition alienates us in every possible way. So much so that we are forever trying to free ourselves from this sense of alienation by joining ourselves to the object. So it alienates us and makes us living in this life, which is nothing but attempt to join ourselves with our objects of desires and push ourselves away, running ourselves away from our objects of fear, of objects of desire and aversion. Understand? So this is the condition, as we know, forever trying to push things out or attract things. This is the impetus for what we normally call love. Now here it says we are trying to get and to push away the objects, and we have the trouble of not only the desire to have, but desire to keep some things. Sometimes we got, but we have a huge desire not to lose it, to keep it, which is already samsara, So we have this trouble, and that includes the desire for other people. Okay? So this is the impetus for what we normally call love. But love is but our nature. Love is not found in any relationship. There is, in fact, nothing with which we can relate, for all is the self. This is why now we are talking about the ultimate truth, the absolute truth. So this is why relationships are usually so difficult and tend to break down. They are false constructions based on the mere appearance of separatedness. Yeah. So this is very interesting. Usually they are difficult and they tend to break down because they are false construct. The entire structure or construct of a love relationship is based on the idea that there is separation, there are two individuals. The problem with human relationship is that I see the other as an object designed to fulfill me. I find I'm the subject, the other is an object, and the other say, no, I'm the subject and you are the object designed to fulfill me. You understand? So this is a false construction, merely based on this appearance of duality, of two objects that appear to be separate, appear to be real, and both claim to be the subject and the other an object designed to fulfill me. Hell is believing that duality and the other people is real. So when the statement before is the hell is the other, and now he's saying here, he's coming back. Hell is believing that there are other people, yeah? That there are two, there are many. When we know there is one self, we continue to perceive other people, but we know this is all appearance on the empirical level called Vyavaharika. That's very nice, huh? That's very nice. It reminds me of certain moments in my life, especially in India, when I was walking in Tiruvannamalai with this clear vision and feeling in my heart, that all is consciousness and all these people are consciousness, and most of them do not know, but although they were kind of concealed by self-ignorance, I could see self-knowledge in their mind because, knowledge, consciousness is always there in any case. But it's so easy to get caught up in duality, even for the yanis again. Every time you see a yani experience a certain conflict, you can tell that, Maya is again pulling the yani's leg. The only different that the yani can more easily recompose, repose, and find his balance, her balance, and see things from within the light of the teachings of the Upanishads. This text has led us through the negations of the 5 sheets, as we remember. If these are not who we are, these 5 levels of human experience / identification. So if these levels of identification with experience are not really what I am, they are not who anybody else is either. So nobody is none of this. It's important to remember that the self-knowledge must fructify to the extent that the yani knows that I am consciousness and everybody is consciousness and everybody is already free. The text has led us through the negations of the 5 sheets. If they are not who we are, they are not who anybody else is either. When we negate the body for ourselves, we negate it for everybody else. And so it is with the other sheets, all the other sheets, all the different levels of human identification with experience, with matter energy. When all are negated, only the self remains. This is the highest understanding. This is what the texts of Vedanta teach, and the truths for which they alone are a means of knowledge. Living in this truth, and this truth is liberation. You see why I'm very careful with this liberation notion, or with this moksha notion, because living in this truth 24/7 is what we could say liberation, moksha, which is not necessarily synonym of self-knowledge, self-recognition. The yani is the one who knows what he or she is. You understand? And this knowledge is not subject to doubt. But living from the standpoint of this truth 24/7, especially when you are in a circumstance which aggravates one's mind, irritates one's mind, this is the absolute liberation. This is the highest truth. This is liberation, is to be free in spite of any kind of condition, you know, prarabdha karma, living in this truth. Okay. So does anybody has anything? We don't have David today to interact a little bit with me. Ruth, very nice haircut, huh? I like it, short, beautiful. Made you younger. Huh?
Actually, I'm growing it out.
Yeah.
It was very short.
Very short, yeah. Hi, Elizabeth. Are you feeling better today? You always forget to unmute your mic when you talk. Please unmute it.
Okay. I said we had a half night, a lot of storm and rain, relentless, so we couldn't sleep very well.
I see. I see.
But it's over now.
It's over. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's very soon you're gonna go to bed and you're gonna have a deep, long hours of sleep, huh? Because it's already late there. I know you. I get mixed
No,
up
I
all
don't
the
want to
time.
go
You
back
are
to sleep.
behind. You are in Oregon. You are not in Holland.
Yeah, I'm in
Because
Oregon.
I know
That's
you are
right.
Dutch. I always think that you are ahead of me, but no.
No. No, we're gonna stay up until we have sleepy again tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're most welcome. So the next topic here is tan 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 ta 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 ta, the realization. Yeah? So the verse 102. The inquirer, this is so beautiful. The closing of this text are always very beautiful. The inquirer said to the teacher, okay, I have understood and I have assimilated the entire teaching, and therefore by your grace I am blessed, for I have accomplished all that is to be accomplished. So what is that which once accomplished is equivalent of accomplishing any and all things, you know? So he says, I have accomplished all that's to be accomplished. What? You have not accomplished many things because you don't have a proper, degree. You did not succeed in business. We don't have a beautiful family with many children in India, which is a very, very, a high accomplishment. So what is that? You just stayed with your guru for some time and you say that I am blessed because by the grace of Ishwara and by the grace of you, the guru, that guru is that which removes ignorance. By your grace, by the grace of guru, I am blessed, for I have accomplished everything that is possible to be accomplished. There is again a sort of contradiction there. Because no, I have not accomplished everything. I have accomplished self-recognition, self-knowledge, but I have to accomplish, something on the financial area because I need more money, I need more this, I need more that. I have to accomplish a perfect, beautiful relationship, I need to accomplish the house, the home of my dreams, and so on. So, no, here, Shankara says that the student turned to the teacher and said, I am blessed because I have accomplished everything that is to be accomplished, because accomplishing your true, fundamental, free, unconcerned nature as consciousness is the highest possible accomplishment, after which all other small accomplishments are no longer relevant. You understand? All other accomplishments, they are no longer relevant, because from the standpoint of the Anyani, all accomplishments of life are much relevant, because they serve the purpose to give me, to provide me with a feeling of completion. But now I have accomplished that which, which is my completedness, which is my fullness. You understand? I just realized my nature is full, whole, in consciousness, free consciousness, and complete. So now anything that I used to do to somehow to fabricate a sense of completion by the means of a mundane accomplishment, all of that is seen as is irrelevant. But it does not mean that the yani, if he is not a sannyasi, he's going to still go about running his or her business, but no longer with the sense that I need to succeed, I need to accomplish success, otherwise I may feel incomplete. You understand? Because you have established the completion as your very nature as consciousness. You have accomplished your true nature, which is full. So therefore, he, in all our texts, says, so you accomplish that and you have accomplished all that is to be accomplished. Okay, because every small bits and pieces of success or accomplishments in life, they just serve the purpose to generate a fleeting notion or sensation or feeling of satisfaction and completion, which fades away very, very, very soon afterwards. No? Therefore, the only accomplishment that really fulfills the individual mind, the Jiva Atma, is the understanding of its very nature, true nature as Paramatma. And he carries on saying that I am released from samsara. So I am released from samsara. It means I'm no longer, bound to the world of experience, of having to run to gain, to get, to accomplish, or to run from that which I want to avoid. So I free from samsara, because every samsari lives running to accomplish things, believing, that this and that accomplishment now may be a beautiful, sexy relationship with someone, or a beautiful home, or a beautiful house. Anything may really complete me now. So this is the mind of samsari. You understand? So, therefore, it says, I am released from samsara, the belief that reality is duality, and that I need this and that. I need to gain, retain, and avoid this and that as a means to establish a sense of fulfillment, of accomplishment. And he goes on to say, I am whole and complete Ananta. Ananta here is present as bliss, but as we know, bliss is a poor translation of the Ananta, because Ananta is meant in Sanskrit fullness, wholeness, completion. Okay, and wholeness, fullness, and completion is only possible by the understanding as of ourselves as limitless conscious awareness, that which is one without a second. So if there is nothing other than the consciousness, the same and the only consciousness shining in the intellect of all human jivas and other jivas. And then I have understood that my nature is bliss. Bliss meaning to say is completeness, is wholeness. There is nothing. And this bliss is a sense of completion and fulfillment that brings with it, a certainty that there is nothing really lacking in one's life. You understand? In spite of all possible adversities, including old age, sickness, and death of the body. So nothing is really going to affect your nature as ananta, as consciousness, as satchit ananta. So I'm whole and complete. I am bliss, and I'm free from the desire of the feeling of anything, of something is missing here. I'm free from lack, and I'm free from desire, and I'm free from time, as he says, and I'm always ever present. So I'm free from time, I'm free from the sense that something is missing, and therefore I'm free from desires. I am everything that is. Just imagine the joy of the teacher, of the guru, and receiving that feedback from the disciple, the student, because there is nothing more joyful to the teacher than seeing this knowledge being assimilated. The student says that he's blessed because he no longer has to do anything to feel accomplished, to feel happy. He understood that happiness is one's very nature, the nature of everyone and everything. So he feels blessed because he has gained everything, which is his own very nature as consciousness. And the impulse to act in the mind of all jivas comes from the sense of incompleteness that arises when we identify the self with the three bodies, with the five sheets, and so on, with the states of the mind. So the impulse to act comes from the sense of incompleteness. So what does that mean? It means that maybe the yoni will no longer have any impulse to act. Not necessarily. It depends on one's nature, on one's guna nature, right? Some yonis have the impulse to act and accomplish things, and we can see the example of the life of Swami Shimayananda. He used to work 15 or 18 hours a day, according to some reports. So the impulse to act, generally speaking, in the mind of the samsaris, comes from this sense that something is missing and I have to solve this problem by the means of action, karma. But later on, the samsari understands that this problem, this sense of incompleteness, will never be solved or resolved by the means of karma or action. So he gets in contact with Vedanta, and the rest of the story you all know. But generally speaking, the samsaris, they act from this sense of incompleteness. And this sense of incompleteness, as we totally know, we totally understood it by now, it comes from this firm identification with the body-mind as the body-mind. So once we are firmly identified with the body-mind as the body-mind, the sense of incompletion is inevitable, okay? And then we act upon that sense of incompleteness, you understand? So once we identify the self, our limitless nature with the body-mind, with the upadhis, with the states of the mind, and so on, all the limiting adjuncts, we will feel limited, okay? And we will feel like I need to act to solve this nagging, this nagging voice that says, do something, do something. And the mind usually is so afflicted by this sense of incompletion, and especially when they are more rajasic, that the last thing that crosses our minds is the idea that I'm better study the scriptures and begin to meditate and contemplate on the teachings, because the habit of trying to solve all sorts of psychological discomfort by the means of action is very, very profound, hardwired in the mind of the Anyani. When we feel compelled to try to rid ourselves of this unnatural feeling of limitation, we have superimposed on the self the body-mind that feels limited and incomplete. And we look to objects as something that is going to solve this problem. So you see, Vedanta is so simple. The mechanics that, how many times I have repeated this simple system, the mechanics of mithya, of maya, of ignorance, see? And all that takes is a shift of identification, which requires a deep understanding of the nature of ignorance, so that the teaching can go and remove or neutralize or cancel this ignorance. But after all, Vedanta is very, very simple once you understand it. This ignorance binds us to the will of samsara, back to the samsara here. We are closing the selected 108 verse, and we are back talking about samsara and karma, to ceaseless striving and perpetual dissatisfaction. This is samsara. Of course, most people, the people who are not prepared to hear this truth, are going to feel like, no. I don't give up on samsara. I'm going to keep striving to solve this problem, by running to gain, running to accomplish, and so on. So it takes time until we want to try a different way, We are bound to this wheel of samsara, which is vasana. It's a desire to think in a certain way, to say things, and to act, which is going to produce more results of actions, more sanshitas, which is going to manifest as our vasana load. Okay, this is the wheel of samsara seen from the standpoint of the human jiva. Seen from the macrocosmic samsara can also be seen as this ignorance that perpetuates itself, creating again and again a new birth, a new body, to go about the same cycle of chasing, trying to complete things, resolve things, gaining things, as a means to complete oneself, to resolve this sense of limitation, inadequacy, and dissatisfaction. It's very, very much a pain in the ass to live in this perpetual state called samsara. The student is exultant because he is now free of this famous Mr. Samsara or Maya. And now he's like, oh, I'm free of this wheel of samsara. And he knows that now he needs nothing. He needs no longer to run about to participate in the rat race, as we say in the States. Why? Because he knows he is the totality, he is the consciousness, he is the substratum. There is nothing he must do to accomplish that which was already accomplished to begin with, because it was always his very nature. He is free from the compulsion to act. This is very nice. Compulsion to act. I need to do something. I feel bad. I feel small. I feel irritable. I feel nagging. I feel this, and I need to do something. This is a compulsion. This is what makes our character, our personality, and sometimes the personality is in such a bad shape that not even Vedanta can heal it. You understand that when the mind of the Jivatma is under some certain conditions, sometimes not even Vedanta works, because it has its samskaras, and which is going to compel the individual to say things and to do inappropriate words and deeds. The student then no longer feels compelled to act. Oh, nice, huh? Oh, we can all be lazy. We don't need to do things anymore. Oh, but Ishwar is going to say, well, you have to clean the house. You have to clean the body. No, no, you know that whatever needs to be done, it's better that it's done. And if nobody does it for you, you better do it yourself. Huh? The student no longer feels compelled to do things because he no longer believes that any doing in time will result in limitless happiness. Any doing in time will result in lasting, infinite happiness, forever happiness, because everything that is done in time dies in time, ends in time, because it's a time thing. So the only way to resolve this problem of dissatisfaction is by understanding that which is timeless, that which is not bound by time. Understand? As one's very nature, not as something, as Brahman, something outside of myself, but as my very nature. Claiming is very important. He no longer believes that any experience in time will result in lasting happiness. No limited action is going to produce that which is limitless. It is a very nice statement. Understand? All of these actions is in the field of illusion that drives us through life. And he realized it is knowledge, not action. It's going back to what I was concluding already before. He goes back and he comes to this understanding that no compulsion to action will solve this problem. He realized that only knowledge, only understanding of one's primary, fundamental, higher, superior, independent, and free nature's consciousness, only understanding this, not action, will establish him in the freedom which is his or her very nature. You understand? There's nothing we're going to gain with self-knowledge. We are just going to understand our nature as freedom. Nothing will free you because you are already free. Enlightenment is not an event. It is a recognition that we are already the light of consciousness that shines in the intellect of all jivas. And unfortunately, due to excessive rajas and tamas, this truth is concealed in the case of most jivas, you know. So it is realizing one's true nature. Enlightenment is not an action or a result or an experience or an event. It's the recognition that we are this free, limitless light of consciousness. There's nobody to be enlightened because you are the light. When this is known, nothing remains to be accomplished. So once we know this, we know everything that's to be known. It's like that parabola that in one of our texts, that the father sent his child to study in a gurukula, and the student comes back after a few years, and he learned so much about the Vedic knowledge, and he came with a little level of intellectual arrogance, and he started just telling the father, oh, you know, I know this and I know that. I have memorized this over the years, and look at this, and da, 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 da. And then the father turned to him and said, did you learn that by reaching that nothing needs to be known? Did you Did you know, did your guru teach you that which by knowing that nothing more needs to be known? And the boy became a little bit confused. You understand? And then the father say, okay, if you have not known that yet, you just take it easy, stop preaching, and in a few days you're going to go back to the Gurukul and ask your guru to teach that, which by knowing you no longer need to know anything because you have known everything which is to be known. Okay. The only knowledge that is going to free the individual mind illusion of being, bound to samsara, bound to objects and so on. Okay, so we have made it. I'm going to go back to my property in the countryside, and we meet again next Thursday. Okay, and I will be sending this videotape, this recording to the people not present here. So does anybody have anything to be said? I mean, again, I don't have David today, and Claudio is not here as well. I mean, Claudio did not, oh yeah, he said maybe he would not come. So we don't have the inquirers, the usual inquirers or questioners. Yeah.
Arlinda, I just wanted to say it's like whenever we get into a text at the beginning, they always show us what the fundamental problem is. And this is so beautiful to have at the end. Here is life once that fundamental problem is solved, It's just really lovely.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah. And thank you for traveling all this way to teach us.
Yeah, I did not want to disappoint you guys 2 days in a row, Okay. Yeah, this text, the closing of our text are important because it demonstrates or tells us that self-knowledge is possible. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy, but it is possible. And it has a huge benefit to the jiva itself when he understands his true fundamental higher nature as consciousness, you understand? It's important to see this. Okie dokie. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, everybody. We meet again in no time. See you.
Thank you, Arlinda. Good
Thank
night.
you, Mark.
Bye.
See you again. Bye-bye, Elizabeth.